Imagine discovering that the quiet professional who spent decades designing homes and office spaces was also accused of hiding one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in modern America. Not a movie villain, not a fictional mastermind, a suburban architect with a long career, a family, and what appeared to be an ordinary life. For years, investigators searched for answers, while families searched for loved ones. Then the case took a dramatic turn. According to prosecutors, the evidence pointed toward a man who had blended into everyday society so completely that neighbors described him as unremarkable. And when reports emerged in early 2026 that Rex Heuermann had formally admitted responsibility for multiple murders, the story became even more shocking. Because the biggest mystery was never only what happened, it was how someone could allegedly live two completely different lives for so many years without anyone realizing what was hiding behind the front door. The case begins long before the headlines exploded across the world. For years, authorities investigated the deaths of women whose remains were discovered along stretches of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach on Long Island. The discoveries sparked one of the largest and most frustrating homicide investigations in New York history. Different police agencies worked leads. Families pleaded for answers. Rumors spread faster than verified facts. Every new discovery raised another question instead of providing a conclusion. Many of the victims had disappeared years earlier. Several worked in the sex industry, making them especially vulnerable to predators and, tragically, sometimes overlooked by society. Their families never stopped searching. They continued making phone calls, distributing photographs, speaking with investigators, and hoping that one day someone would finally explain what had happened. Years passed. The investigation seemed to stall. Public confidence faded. People began wondering whether the person responsible would ever be identified. Then technology quietly changed the game. Investigators revisited old evidence using newer forensic methods. They re-examined phone records. They analyzed vehicle information. They reviewed witness statements with fresh eyes. Instead of looking for one spectacular clue, they patiently assembled hundreds of small details. That approach eventually pointed toward someone who, on the surface, did not resemble the stereotype many people expected. Rex Heuermann lived in Massapequa Park, New York. Professionally, he worked as an architect. Colleagues knew him through business. Clients hired him for construction and planning projects. He commuted into Manhattan. He appeared to participate in ordinary daily routines. From the outside, nothing immediately suggested the enormous investigation that would eventually surround his name. That contrast is exactly why the story captured worldwide attention. People often imagine dangerous offenders as obviously suspicious individuals. Reality rarely follows that script. Some offenders intentionally build ordinary routines because normality attracts less attention than chaos. An organized schedule, familiar neighbors, and predictable habits can become a kind of camouflage. That does not mean every quiet person is hiding something. Far from it. But it does remind us that appearances alone reveal very little about character. When investigators intensified their work, they reportedly focused on patterns instead of assumptions. Phone activity became important. So did travel routes. So did timelines. Piece by piece, prosecutors argued that multiple independent facts began pointing toward the same individual. One breakthrough reportedly involved a pickup truck seen by a witness years earlier. Another involved mobile phone data. Investigators also collected DNA evidence that prosecutors later argued connected Heuermann to several victims. Hair evidence became another important part of the prosecution's case, although defense attorneys challenged aspects of the forensic interpretation throughout the legal process. Notice something interesting. No single clue solved everything. Popular crime dramas often show detectives finding one magical fingerprint that instantly ends the mystery. Real investigations almost never work that way. Instead, they resemble assembling a gigantic puzzle after someone has hidden half the pieces in different rooms. Each clue matters. None stands alone. Together, they create a picture that investigators believe can withstand scrutiny. In July 2023, authorities arrested Rex Heuermann. The announcement immediately became international news. Prosecutors accused him in connection with several murders linked to the Gilgo Beach investigation. Additional charges followed, as investigators continued reviewing evidence from other cases. The arrest surprised many people who had watched the investigation for over a decade, not because they believed the crimes were unsolvable, but because the suspect did not resemble the public image many had imagined. That disconnect created endless discussion. How could someone allegedly maintain a professional career while secretly living an entirely different life? How could years pass without exposure? Those questions fascinated millions because they challenged comforting assumptions about how dangerous people look or behave. Investigators described an enormous effort after the arrest. Electronic devices were seized, documents were examined, digital records received careful analysis. Search teams collected evidence from the suspect's residence under court supervision. Every item had to be processed according to legal standards, because any mistake could affect future court proceedings. That careful approach is often invisible to the public. People enjoy dramatic arrests. Courtroom evidence is usually much slower. Every document, every photograph, every forensic report, every chain of custody form, they all matter because criminal cases are ultimately decided through evidence rather than emotion. As legal proceedings continued, prosecutors expanded the scope of their allegations. Additional homicide charges were filed over time. Each new filing represented months of investigative work, rather than sudden discoveries. Meanwhile, defense attorneys consistently challenged the prosecution's conclusions. They questioned forensic methods. They disputed investigative interpretations. They argued that the evidence should be examined critically before reaching any conclusion. That is exactly how the justice system is supposed to function. Serious allegations require serious proof. Extraordinary accusations deserve careful examination. Emotion cannot replace evidence. Years after the arrest, reports indicated another major development. Prosecutors announced that Heuermann had formally admitted responsibility for killing at least 8 women and dismembering some victims. If accepted by the court, those admissions dramatically changed the legal landscape. Families who had waited years for answers suddenly faced an entirely different reality. Imagine waiting decade after decade without knowing exactly what happened to someone you loved. Then, instead of another theory, you hear the suspect describe responsibility himself. No celebration follows. No victory parade. Only a different kind of silence. Because closure is not the same as healing. Confessions also raise difficult questions. Why confess after years of denying responsibility? Is it remorse? Is it overwhelming evidence? Is it a legal strategy? Is it an attempt to control the narrative one final time? Every case is different. Investigators, prosecutors, psychologists, and legal experts often evaluate those questions carefully rather than assuming a single motivation. True crime becomes dangerous whenever it treats offenders like mysterious geniuses. Reality usually tells a less glamorous story. Many serial offenders exploit predictable opportunities rather than extraordinary intelligence. They rely on victims being isolated. They count on delayed reporting. They benefit from fragmented investigations. Sometimes they simply continue because no one has connected separate crimes quickly enough. There is nothing brilliant about that. Only cruelty. Only manipulation. Only repeated exploitation of vulnerable people. One uncomfortable lesson from this investigation involves society itself. Several victims lived complicated lives. Some worked in environments carrying significant risks. Too often, those realities influence how urgently disappearances receive attention. Families have long argued that every missing person deserves equal commitment, regardless of occupation, income, or lifestyle. That argument deserves careful reflection. Justice should never depend on popularity. Human dignity should never depend on profession. Every family experiences the same unbearable uncertainty when someone disappears. Another important lesson involves technology. Modern investigations increasingly combine traditional detective work with digital evidence. Mobile devices, financial records, vehicle movements, internet activity, DNA science. None of these automatically proves guilt, but together, they create investigative pathways that barely existed decades ago. Technology remembers details people forget. Phones record movements. Computers preserve histories. Vehicles generate patterns. Digital life leaves traces. Investigators who understand those traces can reconstruct timelines with remarkable precision, provided the evidence is collected legally and interpreted correctly. The Gilgo Beach investigation also demonstrates something equally important. Cold cases are not always finished cases. Evidence stored for years can become useful again when scientific methods improve. Witnesses sometimes remember forgotten details. New databases create unexpected matches. Investigators with fresh perspectives ask different questions. Patience matters. Persistence matters. Documentation matters. Many famous criminal investigations have eventually been solved not because one detective experienced sudden inspiration, but because hundreds of professionals refused to abandon difficult cases. There is also another paradox hiding inside this story. The alleged offender reportedly spent years designing buildings. Architecture is fundamentally about creating spaces where people feel secure. The accusations describe conduct representing the complete opposite of security. That contrast understandably shocked the public. It reminds us that occupations alone reveal very little about morality. A respected career cannot substitute for character. Professional success cannot erase criminal responsibility. Titles impress people. Actions define people. As media coverage expanded, countless documentaries, podcasts, and online discussions examined every available detail. That attention helped educate many viewers about the investigation. Unfortunately, it also created opportunities for misinformation. Some internet claims exaggerated evidence. Others invented victims. Some confused verified court documents with speculation. That is why credible reporting matters. Whenever a criminal investigation becomes internationally famous, separating confirmed facts from viral rumors becomes almost as important as understanding the case itself. Responsible storytelling requires discipline. Say what investigators documented. Say what courts accepted. Clearly distinguish allegations from proven facts whenever legal proceedings remain active. Avoid inventing details simply because they sound dramatic. Reality is already powerful enough. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this entire case is not the headlines or the courtroom. It is the lost time. Years during which families waited. Birthdays passed. Holidays arrived. Phone numbers remained saved in contacts. Voicemails stayed unheard. Hope slowly transformed into uncertainty. Every major criminal investigation includes evidence boxes, forensic reports, and legal filings. But behind every document exists a family whose life permanently changed long before television cameras appeared. That perspective deserves more attention than the offender himself. Because true crime should never become entertainment centered on the accused while forgetting the people who suffered the consequences. The lasting impact belongs to the victims. Their names. Their stories, their families, their futures that disappeared. Everything else is secondary. Cases like this also encourage uncomfortable conversations about public assumptions. Many people instinctively believe danger always announces itself loudly. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it wears business clothes. Sometimes it follows ordinary routines. Sometimes it blends into neighborhoods so completely that neighbors later struggle to reconcile memory with accusation. That reality can feel unsettling. But awareness is healthier than denial. The answer is not constant fear. The answer is careful judgment, respect for evidence, attention to warning signs, and support for investigations grounded in facts rather than speculation. As this case continues to be studied, legal records, forensic methods, and investigative strategies will likely receive attention from researchers for years. Detectives may examine what worked well, what took too long, and what procedures could improve future investigations involving missing persons. That may become one of the few constructive outcomes emerging from an otherwise devastating story. Better investigative coordination, better forensic resources, better attention to vulnerable victims, better opportunities to prevent similar tragedies. When people remember this case years from now, the most meaningful lesson should not be that someone allegedly managed to hide behind an ordinary profession. The lesson is that persistence eventually matters. Evidence matters. Victims matter. Families matter. Truth often arrives slowly, but careful investigation can still uncover it. And perhaps that is the final paradox. Buildings are designed to stand for generations. Reputations can collapse in a single courtroom. The difference between the two is simple. Concrete hides cracks for only so long. Evidence has a way of finding them eventually.